We gotta remember to get our guests to do these intros.
Oh God,
we're so bad. We need an assistant. We need an assistant. Well, welcome to the podcast this week, guys. We got Brad Leavitt from AFT Construction on. We're going to be talking about the events that Tyler was just at, as well as myself was just at, BizCom, as well as the Contractor Coalition Summit. What was going on at these events, why you should consider going to these events, and why, we are invested in them. And then a little bonus at the end, Brad's going to give us his LinkedIn tips. He's a big advocate for LinkedIn, so if you guys are interested in that, make sure you listen all the way to the end.
Yeah, it's always good to have Brad on. It was good to spend some time with him in Minnesota. Also, if you don't know Brad, check him out. He's, regardless of what you see with everyone going on the internet and what's real, what's fake, Brad is a hardworking guy with a big family, and always looking to kind of better his business and become, a more well-rounded, profitable business, which isn't typically the case in residential construction. So there's a lot of good takeaways from him. So at least give him a follow.
Yeah, and to that point, we also ask him how he balances his work life and his thoughts on what work-life balance means. I want to start with the Mark situation, where Tyler,
who's Mark?
You're polar opposite.
Oh yeah.
Where'd you go?
That was an amazing night.
Hold on, he's got to move some laundry around or something.
Yeah.
Does he have a wrist support on?
Tyler, do you have your bowling sleeve on? You got a match later today?
Yeah, I got Friday night. It's the league.
Friday night league bowl.
Boys night. We actually go. It's like
free
basketball.
cheese curds.
We go at 5 a.m.
Oh my!
So
I feel like there's two
Craftsman.
things that you don't do bowling. Number one, it's early in the morning, and number two, it's on Fridays.
Yeah, probably not.
I feel like it's like a Tuesday at like 4 p.m.
Yeah, it's very random.
What'd you do to your wrist?
So I guess where the hell did I put you guys? There you are. We had a race that I was working 2 weekends ago, and my hand was bothering me, and I had hurt my leg a while back, and after the weekend, I was like, my hand's really sore. So I ended up going just to make sure nothing was broken, because I know there's a ton of little bones in your hand. And I went, and they're like, well, your hand's fine, but your thumb's broken. And I was like, oh, I was like, really? That's news to me. And they're like, really? You didn't know that you broke your thumb? And I was like, no, I had no idea. And so they're like, you would have known that you broke your thumb. And I was like, well, I guess I just didn't know that it was broken. So I guess I broke my thumb at some point. Never did anything with it. And then whatever was bothering me with my hand was just a sprain kind of from all of that and lack of strength in my thumb. So I've just been trying to immobilize it as much as possible when I can.
Damn.
Bowling is kind of tough right now.
You're two-finger bowling now.
Yeah, I just switch it up. I go lefty.
Oh, I couldn't do that.
Between the legs.
I'd have to have the bumpers up if I was going lefty.
Yeah. Mark, yeah, he is wild.
So that was the first thing I think Brad told me. Was like, dude, Tyler said the funniest thing about Mark, that he is his polar opposite.
Well, the reason it's so funny, because Tyler, he has this really dry delivery, and good comedic timing. So we're sitting in there, and Mark even said, Mark's pretty hyper, Mark Williams, and he's like, I came in pretty amped up to this little panel thing we were doing.
That's an understatement.
Yeah, and he was on fire. He was just going nonstop the whole time. And the minute we finish and we walk out to the car, Tyler looks at me and he's like, if you're to make my polar opposite human, it's that guy. That's funny.
Dude, he's
Mark
just
loved that.
Yeah, he's very vocal and just immediately on. I think that it takes a long time for people to understand that half the time I'm being a smart ass or being sarcastic, and I am quiet, slow delivery, and he's just in your face, loud, laughing at I generally don't laugh at stuff that I say, and he just dies at everything that he says. To the point where it's like, all right, this is intense. Definitely everyone in the room like looking at him.
He's funny, man.
Yeah, Mark's funny.
No, I liked him a lot. He was nice. He was like when I first met him, had a decent conversation with him about, I don't know, life, business, and then when we sat down, he got around everyone else. He really opened up and shined.
So we were just at the Contractor Coalition Summit, and the last night for dinner, we're sitting at the table, and him and I just start having this chat, and the spread of which we covered in that moment went from like talking about the way that people dress on a daily basis, that basically is like, you know, everyone dresses because they want everyone to think that they look good, females and males, to like I'm trying to think of how to explain this without sounding like a psychopath, all the way to the fact of like thinking about death in your family and children, and it went from like fashion all the way to death in a matter of like 7 minutes. And him and I looked at each other at one point. We're like, how the hell did that just happen? To the point where we were talking about stuff that was like literally making us tear up.
Yeah. And
then it was like right back to like going, you know, like what people wear at the gym and stuff like that. But it is like he's very funny, but he's also, I feel like the conversation is really good, and I love chatting with him.
If you get him alone, you'll have like a legit real conversation with him that's pretty meaningful and low key, but then you like get him in a group, and I guess that's his default, where it's just like you had 6 Red Bulls and a line of Coke.
Well, we don't have to make the whole podcast about Mark, but I want to start with that. And shout out to Mark Williams. He's starting a podcast. I think the Curious Builder, if I remember right.
Yeah, the Curious Builder.
Stay tuned for that. What were Brad? You and Tyler were in. I don't even know.
In Minnesota for
Minnesota. I was going to say
BizCom.
Michigan. Yeah. What is BizCom?
So I went last year for the first time. So Morgan from Construction and Style, you know, she puts on this event. Essentially, if I understand correctly, like the reason she put together, like many of us, right? She had a lot of people reach out, like in her community, asking for like design advice or social media advice. And so she was talking with her husband Jamie, and she's like, "Yeah, I just had 3 or 4 appointments this week, at coffee, like tutoring others." And he's like, "What?" Because like many of us, we want to coach others, if you will, or share experience. We've made mistakes. There's things we've learned that we're trying to elevate the industry. So she was doing that, and then she realized, hey, why don't I put together an event instead of just like spending all this time that I don't have? And then I'll bring everyone there. We'll have vendors there. We'll talk about partnerships and social media collaborations and sponsorships. And essentially, she has like a whiteboard up there, posted board where people can put their info, like, hey, I need a controller, or I need some, a business coach or whatever. And so she puts all these like minds together, and then guest speakers. And so I went and spoke last year, and that's kind of what inspired Nick, you and I, and Morgan starting the Coalition Summit. And then this year, Tyler and I were there because I was hosting the panel that Tyler was a guest on. I spoke earlier that night, and then Tyler and I spoke, later that evening. So, yeah,
Brad's
it's a good event.
Brad's a pro, Nick.
I
was up there. I was watching. I was like giving him applause. Very, very engaged. He's up there. He's got the whole outfit on, looking handsome.
The outfit is
putting
ridiculous.
Out the vibes, dude. Then we get home and he puts on AFT branded sweat gear.
Wait, you have sweatpants?
I do, man. We went to dinner, and I'm like, all right, it's time to get out of the suit, man. I'm throwing on the sweats. So I was just chilling, eating a steak next to Tyler, and some sweatpants and a T-shirt is perfect.
But yeah, but the sweatpants have AFT on them?
No, he just give me a hard time. They're Viore sweatpants, but I think Tyler's like, why don't you get those branded, dude? Some Viore like AFT. Yeah,
you should, man.
Get your joggers branded. So it's all branding, right?
I didn't bring it like to our summit. I brought just branded polos and one like button-up flannel, because I just didn't like when I packed. I just never register what I actually should be bringing with me, and then the first night, Brad's like, "Yo, we dressing up tonight?" I'm like, "Oh shit!" So I ran down the street and like I ran through four stores looking for like just a button-up shirt, and then end up with basically, you know, the same thing as my polo, just with more buttons on it and without my logo.
I didn't realize that Brad doesn't always dress that way, because like when he went and he's like, I need to get these clothes off, and I was like, I thought that was just like what you wore all the time,
all day, every day.
Tyler's like, I thought it was casual Friday.
Yeah, he was like, I got to get in something more casual. I was like, I thought that this was casual for you.
So
it was a good event. Sometimes I feel like it was people who wanted to be there. It was nice to have people, honestly, who paid for the event, because I think that the conversations are more engaging. Everyone wants to be there. Obviously, they have some skin in the game, and I think that it's less of people just wanting to like see and talk to you and actually pick your, like, more of picking your brain. So I think that even me being there as a guest, I pulled more out of that than like going to IBS or going to JLC, where there's people and it's essentially, other than a small fee, like where you're going to see many different things, people are there to gain knowledge, to kind of speak with people. And for me, it was the right amount of time. It wasn't too much. You weren't completely exhausted from speaking to people for multiple days. Like, everyone wanted to be there, and it was a good event. I actually enjoyed it. And normally a lot of times with those, I'm like, all right, I'm ready to get out of here. I can't say the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, to Tyler's point, I mean, anytime you have a paid event, right, people are going to invest in it as opposed to just like a general mixer, you know?
That's what I was going to ask is, you know, I think about, so I'm not going to make it to IBS this year, or there's a very, very low chance I'll make it to IBS this year. But that's how I've been thinking about that type of show, or even JLC. It's like you go there and it's just this mixed bag of people, and there's no intention, right? It's just like people either just want to say hi or pick your brain for a second, like, as you're walking in, and there's no structure to it, where it's like you just said, Tyler, you know, when it's an organized paid event, everyone's there with the same mindset. And that's what I noticed at the Contractor Coalition Summit, but also some of the events that I went to, you know, Brad and I have talked about, and I think I've told you, Tyler, like, in between hosting an event, I'll go out and do an event, like the one I did with Jocko that we talked about on here. It's like I went there, I paid a lot of money to be there, and I went and I went there for a very particular reason. I didn't want to just meet Jocko. I wanted to get something out of it. So it's like, hey, yeah, I'll exchange a high fee if I actually get value out of it, and that's all I'm going there to do, is to get value out of it.
Yeah, and I think that you know, with those other events, and that's not knocking those events, and there's a ton of value there, but I think that it's so overwhelming. There's so much to digest that it's almost like, it's like school, right? Where you go and you learn a little bit about all these different things, but you don't fully comprehend everything that's kind of hitting you. It's almost too much at once, and you go to an event like this, and it's a small amount of people. It's a small amount of information. Everything's very digestible, and for me, with like the way that my mind works, it's a much better fit. Like, you can really take away a lot from it, and you can really develop relationships with people that, for me, are more valuable and kind of withstanding. Because I think with those other ones, it's just like the same conversation over and over again, and you're not going there with, I want to see this, I want to see that. It's like, all right, well, something shiny went by over here, I'm going to go chase that. And like these events, you can kind of look up beforehand what's going on, and really get a list of questions together and kind of what you want to learn there, and you have the ability to approach these people and kind of go through that stuff.
The comparison to school is spot on, because you go to school because you're required to go to school and you're required to take X amount of classes. But if you flipped it and said, hey, what classes do you want to take? It's like, well, I want to take this one. And then you're engaged in that one because you've decided to take that.
Yeah, or if you pay like for an extracurricular activity, where it's like, or going and playing recreational sports and then paying for a personal trainer.
Right.
At that point, I met a lot of good people. The conversations were good. The food was good. Brad and I had a nice dinner together.
In sweatpants.
Yeah.
In sweatpants.
I wish, yeah. Well, that was the after dinner.
Yeah, we had 2 dinners together.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I didn't eat the second time. Brad had carrots and a sundae.
Brad loves ice cream.
Yeah.
No, he's like a rabbit. He ordered for dinner. He just ordered carrots.
Well, in fairness, okay, so here's the deal, right? We did have a nice dinner, so great Mexican food. I had my protein, had plenty of chicken, and then we go to dinner again, a second dinner. Not terribly hungry, so it's like, well, you got to have some dessert, something sweet, right? And then you got to at least have something somewhat healthy. So we order some carrots, and everyone's like, Tyler's like, what's the deal, dude? Carrots and ice cream.
It was just all he ordered. I wish I would have had a little bit more time. I flew in and flew out. It was a little bit hectic. I always we went to Minnesota once before. It looks like a really cool city. I know that there's a bunch of political BS that has gone down there. But it looks like a really cool area. I wish I could have spent a little bit more time there.
Is that when we went to Cambria?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cambria's right there.
Yeah, we went downtown. That was really... I remember at the end of our trip, there was that big store that we walked around and had a barber shop built into it. It was super cool. Even the whole downtown was super cool.
Yeah, I would have liked to spend a little bit more time there.
What are you guys' thoughts on these in-person events? Obviously the last few years have been a shit show, to say the least, and everything's moved to digital, and you have all these webinars and these Zoom meetings and digital content. But what is your thought as far as as we continue to build upon that, with digital learning, but hosting these events and and seeing kind of the response in them? What do you guys do you think that these will start becoming more and more popular? This podcast is brought to you by Rockwool. So Rockwool is actually a sponsor of the Contractor Coalition Summit as well. They handed out a ton of swag. They did not hand out knives, Tyler, because everyone had to fly there.
Bummer.
That would have been a difficult flight home. You would have been trying to go.
That happened at Fine Home Building event one year. I'm pretty sure they handed out a bunch of Olfas that people tried to fly home with.
That's a fail. So no one wants to check a bag when they don't have to check a bag. But they were a sponsor at the summit. They're a sponsor of this podcast, and you've heard us talk about it before. But one of the best things about having them as a supporter is the support that they offer us from a technical side, from a detailing side. And I was actually talking to Chris from Rockwell out there, and we had both kind of said at the same time, is that the nice part is that when they're working through systems and trying to figure out how their product integrates with, whether it's interior or exterior installation, they are not, opposed to recommending another product. When it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And they're not going to push, along hey, you know what, why don't you change your framing so you can make our product work? It's, hey, our product works here in all these situations, but in this area, we would recommend you using this instead, or approaching it this way. That way, you get the required R value necessary, or the required sound control necessary.
Yeah, for me, that just is indicative of a business and a company who's in it for the long run. Where sure, you can make a sale short term here, but if that product doesn't work, it's a pain in the butt, or it fails, you're not building those and establishing those long-term relationships. So that just proves what type of company they are and what they want to put out with their product.
But the only way to get access to that network, head over to rockwell.com/rclass and make sure you sign up to be part of their program.
When you think about the online stuff, I think there's a difference between maybe online education or learning, or things you can download to maybe better your business, as opposed to an online networking event. Because I know during COVID, there were some design conferences, and you go on there. But what's really difficult, look, even here, there's 3 of us, right, essentially on this podcast Zoom call. And it's hard that you don't speak over each other, and it's not as personable as being in person, right? So if you're trying to actually be in person to have an event, or have an event with people there, it's too hard online. You got to do it in person. But if there's something you can download that's just like, hey, Tyler's teaching something about, his expertise, bam, download it, good to go, move on, right at your own leisure.
I have trouble with like the online stuff. To me, it's very similar to taking like an online course in school where you're like 50% of you is engaged and 50% of you is doing something else. Where it's like you're in an online design meeting and you're in your office or at home and there's a million other things going on. I think that if you can. Even traveling for it was better, right? Because I'm in a completely different area than I'm used to. I'm unfamiliar with the settings. It's not like I can say, oh, well, on my way there, I'm going to stop by this job or run to the bank. Like, you're there and you're completely immersed in it. It's nice to be able to interact with people, not just one-on-one, face-to-face, but when you're around other people, I think that you can see how others react to what's going on and develop better, stronger relationships with those people. Like I have a couple people that I already reached out to that I met that I want to have on the podcast, business related, where like we had a decent connection. I liked who they were, but I also liked the way that they engaged with other people. And kind of seeing that dynamic where you're standing back and you see what the relationship is with others and how they treat others and kind of in the periphery, that I think a lot of times can strengthen the relationship. Because you have a one-on-one with somebody, if somebody's a good communicator and they can have a good conversation, I think that's one thing. But then when you're on the outside watching how they treat other people, it kind of reaffirms who that person is and solidifies what you think about them. So it was nice. I like the format. I think that it would be more valuable to do something like this, to travel for this, to make a long weekend out of it, possibly bring your significant other, you spend a half a day doing this stuff and then getting some time away. In cool cities, I think it's kind of a perfect setup.
I was thinking that was actually one of the parts I liked most about it, and had a few people reach out. It was like, hey, if you ever come to my home state, let me know. I'll come to the event. And I told them, I was like, one of the best parts of this is that you're not in your home state.
Yeah,
it's that I get being away from the business is difficult, but part of the whole experience is the whole traveling part. And Tyler, you hit it perfectly where you said bring your significant other and make a mini trip out of it. And now it's number one, it's a business expense, right? But number two, it's an opportunity to get into a new city and kind of experience different culture. And while you're doing that, you're also expanding your education in a field that you're interested in.
Yeah, I think it really opens up opportunities to kind of get out there and get outside of your comfort zone, see how other people do things. I also think it's good to speak with people who run businesses in other parts of the country or the world. Everyone does things a little bit differently, and I think that unique perspective definitely can add to kind of how dynamic your business can be. Yeah. It's also like there were people of all different age ranges there, a ton of different backgrounds, which was really cool. What was the guy's name? Greg?
Greg Lasker he's from Chicago.
Yeah. So I didn't meet him prior to the panel, and then he came, he just kind of wandered up and almost seemed like he was lost. He's very unique. I towards the end of the night I understood him more, but he's probably.
Again, if I interrupt you, Tyler, the funniest thing I don't know if you picked up on this. You're sitting next to him up on the panel, and there was a point in the conversation where we were talking about work-life balance, and he said, "I'm 24/7. You go to Google, I'm always available." And going back to Mark, he started calling him while he's on the panel. He kept calling him on his cell phone. His phone's ringing. His phone's ringing on the panel because he's like, "You said 24/7. I'm calling you right now."
That's amazing. But I could, like I said, towards the end of the night, I realized I could understand him a little bit more. But he seemed almost like he was lost for a while. And then I'm talking to him, and he's been like in and out of a couple different businesses. He was a construction management professor at Purdue. He's from Arkansas. And then we're sitting
Super Bowl
at dinner.
champion.
Yeah, we're sitting at dinner, and he's got a Giants. He was asking me where I was from in Jersey, and he was like, he was familiar with Trenton. And a lot of times that comes from like a sports thing, because Jersey's basically divided. Everything south of Trenton goes to Philly fans, and everything north of Trenton goes to like New York fans. So I'm like, oh, he's got a Giants bracelet on. He must be a Giants fan. I'm not a football fan, but I asked him, like, are you a Giants fan? He's like, no, I'm a supporter. I'm like, what does that mean? You're a support? Like, do you give them money? He's like, nah, like I just, and he was kind of beating around the bush. And then all of a sudden he reaches into his pocket and pulls out this massive Super Bowl ring from when he won a Super Bowl with the Giants in 1986. And I was like, you just keep that in your pocket? He's like, no, I had it on earlier, but it was uncomfortable. I was like, well, yeah, it's like half of a pound. But talking to him about that, it's crazy to see, somebody who's started a business not that long ago, was in commercial construction, played college and professional football, and won a Super Bowl. And a lot of times you don't get all of that from an online conversation, meeting somebody in a panel. So it was just, there's a lot of different people and a lot of good takeaways. One of my highlights was meeting him. He was a character.
Greg's a cool guy. He did something similar when he was in Nashville. We got to chatting about something, and I'm not, as everyone that listens to this podcast knows, into sports at all. And somehow football came up, and he did the same thing. He reached in his pocket. He goes, "Here, put this on." And I'm like, "What is this thing?" I put it on. I'm like, "Is this a Super Bowl ring?" And he goes, "Yep." I'm like, "Why do you have that?" Like completely oblivious.
Did you find that?
Completely oblivious to the situation. But
yeah, because he's pretty reserved and soft spoken, and he's almost in slow motion. Like on the panel, they would ask him a question, and he would be like, "I'm gonna defer because I have to think about this." Or even with his responses, they're a little bit all over the place, and you just don't peg him for like a safety on the Giants that won a Super Bowl. But it was pretty funny when he handed me that, and I'm like, you gotta be shitting me right now.
Brad, you knew him, right? Prior to everything?
Yeah, so again, it goes back to LinkedIn, right? So Greg and I have been connected on LinkedIn, I don't know. It had to have been probably 7 years or something when he was a professor at Purdue, and we had never met. I mean, I've seen him a few times at events, and I'm sure crossed paths at some point in the industry, but just connected on LinkedIn, and then he had seen the post about the summit and stuff, and he's like, I need to go, I want to be there. But I think the point that Tyler made that's really important is he had talked about how, with these events, if you go in person, traveling, right, leaving your home state, because last night we had a networking event. We had the Net Zero kickoff event that's here in town. It's a little more casual. I'm at the office till like the last minute. I come rolling in with Mark LaLiberte right at, that would not be the case like if I was in Minnesota with Tyler, where you're showing up early, you're on, you're ready. It's like you're essentially investing in the time being there, and you're going to get a lot more out of that networking just making that commitment, as opposed to just in my backyard.
Dude, it's true. It's whenever you have an event to go to, the people who live the furthest away are typically the earliest.
Yeah.
It's like, you live 5 minutes away and you were the last person here, just because, like, even that anxiety of, hey, I have to prepare for this, or I have another hour, it only takes me 20 minutes to get there. When you have this entire trip that you're planning around this, like, you are invested mentally, financially, everything else in this. Another cool thing that I liked was, obviously I have 2 daughters. Brad, you have 5 daughters.
Right.
There was a lot of female-owned businesses, female entrepreneurs, and it was really cool to see these women either get up on stage, have a conversation, give their advice and their expertise, and like potentially empower a lot of other women to be strong and go out and improve their business and kind of gain experience and gain knowledge. There was a few older women who like relocated or just started their business after their kids kind of left and went off on their own. And it was really nice to see that, where it's like, hey, they're stepping out of their comfort zone. There's all these other women here who are looking to help them. They're professionals in their field, in their craft. And I always love, even when we have female guests on, whether just they want to empower other people. I think more so than men do. So that was really cool for me to see, like, the group of women that were out there looking to help each other and how professional they all are.
Well, I think what's interesting, Tyler, I mean, when we're sitting there on that panel, it's just different perspective, right, on life and business and even personality. And Catherine, who was there, and I know she came with us, Nick, to the summit, but Catherine Schiffer was there, business coach, and she was speaking to some of the women that were, essentially in the networking group that Tyler and I were in, just speaking about how, a lot of times, because some of the women were asking about, how do I make sure I'm charging? And in fairness, some of us builders don't understand, like, are we charging enough? Are we charging our value? How do we know what that value is? Are we kind of being pushed aside? And so, but some of the female perspective was different, like being in the industry, and sometimes they're overlooked or not listened to, or maybe, even some clients will bully them, right, with certain aspects. And, she gave a perspective from the female side that I think stuck out about, just some advice on how they could be more stern and more confident, right, in demanding their price and not, in her words, she said, be a people pleaser, essentially. But it just is unique, because I think a lot of us, not just females in the industry, struggle with, like, our worth or value, right, that we should be charging, and how do we address that or communicate that?
That's a great point, especially around, like, the female side of it, because we had a couple girls at the event in Huntington Beach, and you think about that room and the conversations that are being had in that room, and everyone, again, I'm repeating myself, but everyone's there for the same reason. And it doesn't, like, no one cares where you're from, what you do, who you are, female, male. Everyone respects what everyone's doing, because everyone wants to, as we say, level up. And I think that, I know the three of us can to attest to it, where it's sometimes we feel alone, right? Like, we feel like we're the only one dealing with bullshit or issues, and we don't know how to work through it. But when you're, or you do feel like you're doing the right thing, but then someone in your network tells you, no, dude, you're doing the wrong thing. Like, that's not the way you're supposed to run your business. You're supposed to do this. Don't build custom, build spec. Do this, do that. Like, and I can see how, we talk about the females in the construction industry and how they don't feel welcome, or they feel uncomfortable to be in the industry because there's no support for them. Where it's like that, these events, that's not even we don't even talk about it. It's not even a discussion, because everyone is there to support everyone, and everyone's learning from. Meg, was at the event, and, like, she, she's a builder. I had met her at IBS a few years ago, and she's doing the damn thing, and she was there and, like, having conversations, and I'm talking to her and getting her feedback. I mean, I just think that I think it's important for anyone that wants to be in business to network with, like-minded people, because there's so much and so many people that are constantly against what you're doing, trying to push you in a different direction, where it's like, frankly, I think my whole life I've been told, do something else. Don't do that, do this. Where it's like,
I personally just, like, love the female perspective, maybe because it isn't as common in our industry, but sitting at the kind of our networking event earlier in the day, which it was primarily women, it was just, like, the perspective they have, for me, always being around men in the construction industry, it just seems like there's so much more depth. Their responses to questions seem to be more articulate, more well thought out. It's not just like, we'll do this because the numbers are going to do, like, the perspective that they have and the way that they think is so different than we do. Like, their approach to everything, to life, and that's just because there's a difference there. the way that they experience the construction industry, and it shouldn't be that way, but there is, and what they bring to the business side of things is so valuable, and it's so refreshing to see. And like, I left there thinking I want to get these people on the podcast, and it's all women, because I'm like, you don't always hear that perspective. We're just around men all the time, and it's such a male industry that it was so nice to see all of these women like out celebrating each other and celebrating business and self-growth and bettering themselves. And I was like, I'm totally for this. Like, I can get behind this.
Yeah.
So you guys, after this, Brad went home, had a family get together with. So Brad flew into this event and then changed some flights around, played basketball, flew home, had lunch or dinner date out with the kids and the family, and then flew to California for your event, right? Is that right?
Yeah, it's a pretty normal day, I guess. Leave at 4 a.m. to Minnesota, speak, hang out with Tyler. Then Mark, again, he's like, hey, Brad, your flight's not till 9:30 in the morning. Let's play basketball at 5 a.m. So he picked me up at 4:45 at the hotel. We played basketball for a couple hours, go straight to the airport, and I land, and I actually had we have, not to go sidetrack, but we have a project that had some complication, and so we had to meet with the vendor. So we met the cabinet company, just working through, and then I'm like, I got to go because I got to get all my kids from school. And we picked up all 6 kids and went out, had lunch as a family, spent some time throughout the evening and afternoon and stuff, and then hopped on a flight to California. So got to maximize work, family, business, right? That's really life. So
yeah, so that was your event that you guys put on with Morgan, right?
Yeah, that was Huntington Beach, the Contractor Coalition Summit. So I think, Brett, you and I got in at similar time, right? You were in early morning,
midnight, 1 a.m. Yeah, that's when I got in.
Yeah.
Sleep when you're dead, man. It's all good.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm with you. We talk about this constantly. It's like the constant work-life balance. I mean, Brad, you and I had a chat about it, and it's difficult. Like, there is a difficult side of this, and I think a lot of people want to know how do you balance it? How do you make home life just as good as work life? Can you speak to how you do it, Brad? And like what?
Yeah, I think and it's funny because I mean you have to realize that look. When you say work-life balance, I don't know, it means different things to different people. But more importantly, you only have so much that you can put in each bucket, right? All of us have different buckets, and so you're filling out each bucket. And what you can't allow is that one bucket gets top-heavy or tips over and the other doesn't have enough, right? And so essentially, you just have to track it. So there's not really a balance. And for me, I just, every day is different for me. Depending on travel schedules or work or the business development side or like kids events. I have 6 kids, so they have events. My oldest daughter's in college. My youngest is 5 years old in kindergarten. We got them active in a ton of sports, all my kids, from swim and musical theater and flag football and just everything, right? So the thing is, my wife, she needs time, so we do date night every week. And so it's just really important that you just try to maximize each day and say, okay, as I look at my schedule, and I'm pretty OCD about my schedule and where I'm at and my time commitments because I have to be, right, between just running a business and social media and some of the networking events we do. But it's just, as long as you find balance and checking in and, I have daddy-daughter and daddy-son dates, with my kids as often as I can. And, that's always good to have one-on-one time as well. So
that's a lot of one-on-one time.
It's a lot of one-on-one time. It's a big commitment, man. That's why a couple nights a week, it's family time. Yeah.
There's not enough days in the week. Well, I guess you got one for everyone, for the kids and the wife.
Yeah, yeah.
I have some questions about your event, if you don't mind going down that path.
Yeah.
So this is the second one that you guys have had?
Yeah. Yes.
All right, so what's the structure of these events, kind of the setup for somebody who doesn't know anything about them? Is it everyone doing everything at the same time? Are there speakers? Can you kind of pick and choose what you're going to do?
Yeah, that's a good question. So everyone's together. I mean, the whole core of the event is like we touched on earlier, Nick, Tyler, you and, all of us, you start a business, and, I've always been big on you're a business owner that happens to focus in construction. So at the core of it, like most of us, don't spend enough time understanding business, whatever that may mean, right? From profitability to company culture to, systems and organization, right? Those are terms that most of us in construction may not have. So that's a big part of it. And then, really diving into, no one's going to teach you, okay, Tyler, or Nick, here's how you do a fixed price. No one's coming in and saying, oh, Brad, you're starting your company. Great. Here's how you do cost plus, right? Here's how you bill for it, and you're actually profitable. And so what we've done is the format, we have a kickoff event, right now it's Sunday night. This is our mixer. We typically have a guest speaker. This time in Huntington Beach, we had Mark LaLiberte, who comes and speaks about building science and, how we can kind of up our game as far as sustainability and just be aware.
It's important.
And why it's important, right? Yeah.
So you're kind of keeping everyone together. It's not like you're breaking off into separate
There's no
groups.
breakout. No.
There's no breakout.
Everyone's together. And I think that's what's the most organic part is like when you go Monday, Tuesday all day, we have essentially 4 2-hour sessions with a little break in between Monday and Tuesday. And each 2-hour session is dedicated to whether it be social media, marketing, how to make money outside your business, it's dedicated to pricing. Like we're super open. Here's what Nick charges. Here's how Nick does a burden rate. Here's how I charge. And then we just show them like, here's how you bill for
I use,
scheduling, client expectation, just everything you need from like A to Z to run your business.
The way I've explained it before is like these are all the things that we've put into place or are actively putting into place that have allowed us to increase our profit, our bottom line. And, the way I looked at it and why I want to share as much as we do is because I've spent a lot of money. Brad and I, kind of quick math the other day said that we were like $50,000 into just legal fees in creating some of these documents in these contracts. And if you think about how wildly inefficient that is that, all right, there's thousands of contractors in the U.S., and they're all spending tens of thousands of dollars to have a contract drafted up or reviewed. Or they're not doing it, and then they're not protected. Where it's like, and that's probably the more accurate, is that they're not doing it and they're not protected. So it's, here's an opportunity where it's like, all right, yeah, I had to invest it anyway, but here's an opportunity for us to share, that. Here's the, we financially invested in it, but we're going to now share it. The labor burden that, Brad's talked about, it's like, that's a spreadsheet that I worked on with my accounting team. It's like, hey, I want to know to the penny what someone cost me when I hire them. And then if I give them a raise, what does that do? Like, how does that impact the business? And every time I walk through that sheet, everyone's like, yeah, all that makes sense. And then I scroll down and then I show like the bottom half of that spreadsheet of the other things that they, that particular employee might cost the company, whether it's PTO or sick time or vehicle. Like, they're like, holy shit, I forgot about those, that part of it. And then you realize that, someone that, you pay $25 an hour is actually costing you $51 per hour, whatever the case may be. And it is to that level and to that level of transparency to, again, to give people the opportunity to either make small changes within their business or really, really big changes. We had guys there that, that I talked to before even showing up. They were like, I don't think I'm ready for this event. I said, why do you say that? And they're like, well, I'm a one-man show. I'm like, are you always going to be a one-man show? He's like, well, no, I want to scale. I'm like, so try to get, come now and understand, the stuff that we...
Rather than after the fact.
Make money now. What are you waiting for?
And it's funny. I tend to tell a lot of stories and a lot of, very difficult stories, like stuff I've screwed up or stuff I've done wrong or... so it's to that point where I want to make sure that, hey, here's all my cards, here's what I've screwed up really bad, and this is how you can prevent it. It's like I told a story last week just about how on one particular job we lost $200,000, and it was a very simple mistake that I made that I could have easily prevented that I didn't. And it's like, here's learn from this.
Yeah. I'm not ready for this. I want to, so I could teach you how to not bang your head against the wall. And like, you're still going to a little bit. Like, now, you know what? I'd rather bang my head against the wall for a year or two and then unlearn that. Right. It doesn't really make sense. Sorry, Brad, go ahead.
No, well, what's interesting, I mean, it's really easy for someone to sit back and say, Tyler has it all together. Like, he knows his stuff. It's been that way. For Nick, it's the same thing. You know, you guys know what you're doing. But to be really honest about this, I remember when I started my company and not understanding just all the business aspects to running a construction company and hiring people. And like Nick said, if you give someone a raise, what does that mean? Do your sales match? Does your bottom line, right, between gross and net profit? And it seems simple, but I remember early in my career when I first started my company early on, I'm like, how do people make money in construction? Like, honestly, like, can you make money at this business with all the risk? And thinking, should I even be doing this? Until you really understand the core of the business. And then you can build on that. And so it's really easy to look from afar, like everyone has, you know, everything figured out. But no, like Nick said, we're figuring this out. And, you know, every day, you know, fortunately, you know, for some of us, we've been in different networking groups or, you know, met different business owners that have given great advice, or we've gone to leadership retreats, right? Like you've done, Nick. And, you know, and so we've been able to implement these things. But why wait to accelerate that growth? You know, these are things that if I knew 10 years ago, I would never have questioned how do people make money in construction.
Yeah. And people, it's funny. Somebody just asked me this morning, like, did you like learn all of this stuff beforehand, or is this something you kind of learn on the fly after the fact? And I'm like, I'm still learning. Right. Like every single job, from a paperwork, a financial, or just an execution, like how long did you take to learn all this stuff? Like I'm not done learning. Like it's been a lifetime, and it's going to be a lifetime where like you can, there's tons of takeaways. There's so much that you can learn if you're willing to kind of change and be open to change and receptive to what other people have to say. And that's not to say that what Nick does or what Brad does, like the spreadsheet, is 100% applicable to you and your business, but there's certain aspects of them that you can take. Like Brad said earlier, like business is business. It doesn't matter if it's construction, it's medical, you know, there's a lot of principles that kind of overlap and transcend from one business style or type to another. And you can take away those things and little bits and pieces of what you guys do and apply that to your business and make a much stronger business.
It's funny, Tyler, shout out to Helsum that showed up at the Huntington Beach, but he at the end of the event, he walked up to me, he goes, "Can I just ask you a question?" I said, "What's up?" He goes, "When did you learn this?" And I laughed, and I was like, I thought to myself, I'm like, which part? Like, if you're talking about the core value part, last week, you know? Like, if you're talking about the labor burden, about 13 months ago. Like, it's, you know,
and still on the project I am now, I'm still learning.
Right. Yeah. And the whole point of this is, you know, I've talked to Tyler, you and I have had a unique opportunity to talk to like close to 300 people in this industry. Yeah. And what I have realized is that the people that are later in their career, close to retirement, or have retired, yeah, they're turning around and like teaching. But it's almost as though they're waiting to do, like, all right, I'm retired now I can teach. Yeah. Where, you know, you and I and Brad, like now with this event, we're doing this actively, and it's a coattail effect where everyone that I'm looking at is a year or 2 years ahead of me. And, you know, maybe there's a few people that I'm paying attention to that 5-10 years ahead of me, but when you start getting to the people that are 5, 10, 15 years ahead of you, it's really hard to understand how you get there. Where it's like,
it's also not relevant at that point.
Right. Well, very true, yeah. But the person that's a year ahead of you, or like, you know, doing a little bit more work than you, doing 3 projects at a time instead of 2, they become relevant, but also like it's seemingly obtainable. Yeah. So it's this whole point of the coattail effect of, hey, I'm running up this hill, and as I trip over something, I'm going to turn around and say, hey, watch out for that rock.
It's funny that you say that, because I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and it was I just like one thing to another, and whatever comes up, I was just busy day. It was crazy. I wasn't really picking anything, and it wound up being on motocross technique, and that there's there are a couple young guys who are actively right now the best in the world as far as motocross riders and supercross riders. And they're doing that, but they also have started like this online teaching school, and you can go see them in person too. And somebody said, you know, could you imagine if the guys who were doing this 20 years ago, like, had people teaching them as they were learning it? And it's a nod to what you said, Nick, where like these guys are currently the best in the world, and they're teaching it right now. And what they're teaching is applicable right now. It's not 15 years removed from their career where they're teaching stuff that they learned that's not the same anymore, while the bikes are different, the techniques are different, the tracks are different. And it's no different than what we do in business. You have somebody who's 65 years old who started their business, you know, 35 years ago, 45 years ago, and what they're teaching, yeah, there's some basic principles that are the same, but they're so far removed from it, it's almost better for somebody who's a year removed, who's in the depths of it, to be teaching you what they know and what they learn, because everything's applicable. And I think that it is more beneficial for people to be learning. And that, like, the hard part about that is convincing people that, like, you're not just making shit up. And a lot of times because a lot of times you are, right? And like, but if there's somebody who's willing to put all of this at stake and learn on their own dime, and then educate you as to what did and didn't work, like, that's so valuable, because those mistakes aren't costing you. And to kind of keep that knowledge close to the hip is foolish and doesn't make our industry any better.
So let me ask you this: why do you think that being one of the top motocross riders in the whole world, why would they feel the need to then teach it?
I mean, obviously you have to look at it from a financial perspective. It's another source of income that they can produce. But I think at the end of the day, it's helping people, right? Like, you listen to the conversations and you watch the videos, and they're helping young kids, they're helping women, they're helping older people. It's not just people who are professional riders, but they're learning, they're pushing the bounds of what they're doing at the highest level. And it's just like anything else. It could be wrestling, it could be an Olympic wrestler, where, like, I'd rather have somebody who's currently wrestling or is just removed from wrestling be a coach, be running clinics, than somebody who did it 40 years ago. While there's, I'm sure, a ton of work ethic and training and discipline that they can instill in you, wrestling is different now than it was 30 years ago. And, like, having somebody who's in it right now, I think the hardest part about that, and what the trouble is with that, with any industry, especially ours, is same thing with our podcast, Nick, and I'm sure Brad, the time that it takes for you to pull back and spend the time teaching, like, for teaching's sake and for goodness sake, that only gets you so far. At some point, if a lot of your time and focus is going there, you have to be compensated for that financially, or else you just can't make time for it. And it's not that you're greedy, and it's not that you want money, but it's like, hey, if I'm devoting 4 hours a day to the Modern Craftsman podcast and I can't be on a job working, like, I can only do that in good faith for so long before my wife's like, hey, we have bills piling up. So, like, at some point you have to compensate for that, and there's the whole financial aspect of that.
Totally. And I asked that question thinking about Masterclass just announced that they have Lewis Hamilton, one of arguably the best F1 race car drivers out there, right? Maybe not this year, but, you know, he's won, I don't even know how many championships, but he's doing a Masterclass. It's like, this guy's making millions and millions and millions of dollars a year, lives the absolute life. Like, why does he need to also do a Masterclass? And it's like, sure, like, I'm sure Masterclass is paying him a pretty penny because he's well known, but to your point, you know, I think it's also very much due to the fact that he wants the help. And that oftentimes gets blinded. People get blinded by the fact that, oh, he's getting paid, of course he's doing it. It's like, right, there is that side of it, but when you're at that level, you don't need to be doing a masterclass.
No, and the financial can't be like the driver for everything there, right? I think at the end of the day, like, that helps offset and cover your time, where it's like, I have this cost of living, I have these people to support and this business to run, so I need to make at least that while I'm devoting the time to this, if not more, because and usually it's if not more, because it's like, hey, same thing if you're a sub. If I work my own jobs and somebody wants me to sub for them, it doesn't make sense for me to go sub for somebody and make less money if I can do it myself and make more. So, like, it has to at least equate to your time if you're doing it consistently. But I think go ahead.
Yeah, another aspect to that, Tyler, I mean, especially the financial side, but the reality is, like, and this kind of goes back to why both of you do it. I know I've spoken to you both online, right? A lot of this is your legacy, right? I mean, the construction is a hard business. It's, like, super difficult. And so for you guys that want to have an impact, right, on the stuff you've learned, but even more so what I found is, like, when you become a thought leader, not only do you essentially, like, lift the industry, like both of you are trying to do through this platform and through your social media that you both do, but what's interesting, what I've seen too, is when you are out there and you're sharing all this stuff, the clients come, right? When you're thinking about ideal client and marketing, I find that a lot of my clients are seeing that and they're like, hey, I want AFT, or I want Tyler, or I want Nick to build my house, because they get it. And a lot of my clients are entrepreneurs, right? They built businesses, so they see that entrepreneurial mindset, and there's just common ground where it's a trusted entity now, and they know whether it be building science or net zero. And so just as you mentioned with, like, motocross, right? I mean, you see it on TikTok with, like, weightlifters. Why do I need to go tear my rotator cuff when I can learn how to bench properly, right?
Yeah.
And, basketball, these little things. We didn't have that, but now you have that, and it just elevates you and your brand selfishly, where it attracts a whole different type of client into your portfolio.
I mean, like, unless you're a psychopath who doesn't like helping people as well, right? Where it's like, all right, say there's something that you're really good at, Nick or Brad, and somebody was like, hey, I'm thinking about trying this. You would be like, yo, let me know when, I'll help you, right? Yeah. And, like, because that makes you feel good, because it's making somebody safer, smarter, more successful. They're not going to kill themselves. And that's great on the one-off scenarios. Like, you can help a handful of people, and it feels good. It's not going to consume all of your time, but that's kind of where it begins and ends. If you want to help more people than that, you need to find a structure or a way to expand upon that and hit hundreds of people, thousands of people, millions of people. And you, as a single person, you don't have that time to go and help 1,000 people one-on-one, right? You get 1,000 people together at one event, like one of these events. Yeah, now it's more doable. And maybe it's not the same as a one-on-one experience, but it's better than me giving you 10 minutes or 1 minute. Mm-hmm. Like, you're at least, like, this is the best way that we can do this. And we have to be able to compensate ourselves financially or with time, because you can only be kind of a good person for so long before you just have nothing else to give. And I think the goal for all of us would be the F1 driver, the motocross racers, the business owners, is to be able to help people. I think that at the core of it, behind all of this, is you want to help people. You want to make people's lives easier. You want them to be more successful, to be better. And it just gets to a point where it's like, how can I do this and give all of my time to this if I'm not making money doing that? It's tough. Like, unless you have all the money in the world, like, at some point, if your time's going towards business, construction, or helping people, like, you need to be making an income. So it's finding ways to make an income while you're teaching and helping people. I don't think that the finances for this F1 driver are what's, for lack of a better term, driving that decision.
No, but I think
it helps that person put the time towards that.
Yeah, and I think you're right in the sense, like, you think about when a friend or even just someone comes up to you and says, hey, like you said, I'm trying to do this thing. You know, my knee-jerk reaction is, oh, yeah, just let me know. I'll help you.
Yeah.
And it's like, even I know I'm overcommitting myself. It's like, I know I can't.
But it feels good.
Right. And then it's like, all right, or at least give me a call and I'll walk you through it. Or like, hey, FaceTime me and I'll draw this up on the whiteboard and I'll show you how to do it. But, and then, you know, from our side of it, like you said, that's a one-off scenario. And this whole reason we started the podcast years ago was because we kept answering the same question over and over. It's like, hey, what would you do in this situation? Hey, how do you do this? It's like, what if we create content that, you know, offers lots of people the answer?
Well, that's the thing. Like, that friend calls you, right? And they're like, hey, can you walk me through this? What if you were like, hey, what's it going to cost for me to document this experience?
Right.
Right? How much is that going to cost to do? And then you shouldn't be paying for that out of your pocket. But then it's like, hey, I can find 10 people who are in that same scenario. Are you each willing to pay $100 for me to create this content to walk you through this? Because I don't have, if that experience takes you 4 hours, I don't have 40 hours to devote to this, but I have 4 hours. And if you each pay me $100, I'll put the money up to document this and then can share it with all of you. And like, I think that can snowball. Brad,
you had said, like, both of the events I've done with you, there's a ton of people from Phoenix that went. And we had, you know, we kind of laughed about it. What was your thought as far as, like, all of these other people in your market, some of them probably being a potential competitor? What's your thought about them?
Well, it's interesting because, in Nashville, I think we had 6 builders from Phoenix who are all in my...
Just carpooled.
Yeah. Just carpooled to Nashville, and we have a couple
just took Paul's van.
which I just got Paul a new van. He's been asking me. So he has his family van, and not to sidetrack here, but he's been asking me for, like, ever about a
what kind of van does he have?
He has, like, one of those big Nissan 15-passenger. Yeah, commercial
15?
bus. He has, like, 15 passengers, 9 kids, man. He's a busy man. But yeah, what's interesting, we had 6 builders come, and then we had a few this time. And what was interesting, when we got back from the summit, one of the builders emailed me, and he's like going through all my pricing because I had shown him like everything. And he's like right here in my backyard. And, you know, on one hand, it's easy to say, I can't share what I'm charging, right? I can't share how I'm running my business because these are my competitors. But at the same time, I think I've told you and Morgan this offline. I'm like, look, I'm pretty confident in our brand and our reputation and, you know, our systems and stuff. But at the end of the day, if we can elevate the industry, for me, the way the angle I've taken is that if I have more builders that are consistent in what they charge their client, right, and they're consistent in, you know, being profitable, and they're consistent in being better schedulers, which is less burden on all of our subcontractors that we share, it's going to elevate the industry. It's going to make our community better. It's going to make it easier as I have these conversations that we're essentially all playing from, you know, the same starting point, and so many of us aren't. And so many of us are undercutting our pricing in this race to the bottom that you guys have talked about here on the podcast. And so I at the end of the day, I don't have an issue. I mean, I'm networking with these builders anyways here. Why not just say, look, here's a better way to do it?
Yeah, that's a tough question, Nick, on many levels. And I think that for so long, people have been afraid to disclose that information. Like, it's all this secret, where I think you looked at any other industry and it's like, yeah, people know what you're charging, and you make a decision based on many different things, and it's not just what you're charging. It's who you are, the service that you offer. If you're a big company, if you're a small company, I think that what you're charging is just a small piece of that pie. But it's easier said than done, right? To be like, hey, I'm going to disclose this to somebody who's in my area, because with our industry, that just hasn't been the way that it's done forever. But it should kind of validate what we're doing as builders, remodelers, contractors, if everyone's kind of on the same page there. Like, you don't want Brad at one price point and somebody else at a completely different price point. Right. It just, like, were you just pulling these numbers out of your ass?
Right. And then it's also not fair to the client. I've said that before, is that ultimately then the client doesn't get an apples to apples comparison, or even just from a value perspective. It's like, okay, you hire someone that's less expensive, what's their approach? Are they going to use lesser quality subs, or are they going to make less profit, so they're not going to be around for a very long time, so the warranty really means nothing because that business is going to go out of business? There's so many levels to that. But selfishly, what I like about sharing, beyond just getting everyone on a level playing field, it's also the fact that it's forcing us to be better and forcing us to innovate. Where it's like, hey, here are all of my cards, and when I go back to work, it's like, now I've just created a competitor because they're completely equal to me, and fictitiously. So I need to figure out what is the one thing I can do to stick out amongst that crowd, and just constantly evolve and create this coattail.
I know that we talk about this a lot, but I just have such a hard time when people are based, like, the primary determining factor in choosing a contractor is because of if it's cost plus, like what their markup is. And I always do this where I think of other industries, and it's like, let's go to the car industry, right? And you're not going to pick a car because Ford is making a higher profit on their car than Chevrolet. Like, if the price is the price, what they're making, if their profit margin is higher, that's not going to be a driver in your decision for buying that car. Like, maybe the overall price, maybe what they offer, their warranty and everything else. But, like, to make a decision based on somebody's profit margin because Brad's more expensive than Nick and has a 20% markup rather than a 19.5%, like, that shouldn't even be part of what you're deciding, because you should be deciding on much more important things than that.
100%. Brad, can you still hear it? Can you hear us? I think he lost audio.
Oh, I thought he was just fighting the sun over there. He's got, like, the sun in his face.
I know. The sun's coming up in Phoenix. He's going to log out and come back in. Exactly. And it's, we talk about this. We talk about this in the meetings. And a lot of this is optics. And, like, being able to get the client to focus on the importance of what we're putting together as, like, a proposal. It's optics, and we want our client to, everyone flips to that last page on your budget and says, how much is this going to cost? And then, okay, it's $4 million. What's the next thing they look at? All right, how much money are you making on this job? Talking about cost plus. And then they look at your fee, and it's like, if either of those things are off, their decision is almost immediately made. Where it's like, all right, well, if we can communicate a better, story as to why it's $4 million and why my fee is 15% or whatever the case is, and walk them through that, and get and instill confidence behind that, you change that playing field.
Absolutely. I just, it's tough for that to be, and I get it. I understand it completely, but it's really tough for that to be the ultimate deciding factor in a lot of what we do.
Yeah.
And I think especially now, I think that our industry is changing a little bit, and I think that people are becoming more educated, that there's more out there, and that we're not all created equal. And it even comes down to, like, what we're doing, right? You guys are both looking to teach and to educate, and while maybe you're offsetting that income and making a little bit of money doing that, it's still a huge investment for us. And, like, to hire a contractor who's actively looking to educate other contractors, the next generation, and kind of better the construction industry, for me, that's somebody who I want to be involved with. That's somebody who I'd like to hire, who's really engaged in the industry. I think that for us, that's like a really good thing. I think that our industry is turning a little bit there.
And I think that to relate it back to something that we talk about at these events, it's, not every client cares about that. And, and it's not something you can always convince a client, be like, hey, wouldn't you rather work with me who's like making the industry better? No, there's a big portion of people that are like, nope, I just want to get the best price I can get. I don't care, like my life, is going to end one day, and however that industry continues to thrive is not my problem. And
exactly, but that's not who also
you want to be working for.
Yeah, I don't want that relationship with them.
Right.
I was just going to say, it's not your ideal client, right?
Brad, you're coming in hot, bro. Why are you so loud?
Yeah, loud.
How about now? Is that better?
That's better, yeah.
All right. Coming in hot. So, Tyler's done a good job of showing like his craftsmanship, right, and level of detail, because he doesn't want every client. Most of us should be achieving this ideal client. And yeah, cost is a big thing, but through these platforms and, the more systems we have in place, the more, better company culture, the better, quality and branding and, thought leadership and sustainability, whatever it is that we're marketing, that's going to bring in the correct clients. And there are clients that value that, right? There are clients that value an investment and an operation that's going to be seamless. There's a reason why people spend a lot of money going to a 5-star hotel, and a lot of it's not just the luxury side, a lot of it's the customer service, right? That it's, turned down at night, where you come in your room and everything's again cleaned up and there's, chalk on your pillow, whatever. And so people want that customer service, that red carpet, white glove service. And so if you can offer that or show how you offer that, it's going to bring in a whole different, clientele.
Do you know what I liked about listening to Brad speak at this past event, other than the delicious food I was eating while he was doing it? Like a lot of his conversation was based around problems that he sees with his processes, with the construction process, with his business, and these struggle points and what he can do to make them better. And I think that from a conversation perspective, like thinking about the limited amount of time he had to kind of pass this knowledge on and kind of advocate for his business, and like the structure with BizCom versus what you guys were doing, right? You guys at your event, you have 2 hours to kind of sit down. You can get into the nitty gritty. You can get into these details. You can teach some stuff. But what he did at BizCom, which was nice, was like you spoke to bigger principles and kind of ideals that you can have within your business, and you didn't get down deep into the weeds. And I think that conversation, like there's a ton of takeaways from that with the hour that you had to speak, where it wasn't so overwhelming. And I enjoyed that conversation because I thought that you did a really good job of digging into, hey, like what are the issues that we can have in the construction, in our business, and how do we solve these problems for our customers?
Yeah, it's interesting. Tyler, it's funny because, the more time we spend, right, is that in construction, there's so many emotional touch points with our clients, with those that follow us. And in construction, just doing this. So when I say construction is tough, we understand even when you're in the industry every day and you're managing expectations and people and a labor force that isn't great, right? It's not only not accessible, but it's not prevalent. There's not a lot of craftsmanship, and you're dealing with price increases, and that you're dealing with all these factors. But the reality is the clients are dealing with that even on a bigger level because we're not communicating or setting expectations. So the more pain points we can discover in our business through that client experience and that client touch point. And I'm really big on this with my team when I teach them over and over every production meeting. What's the difference between the client experience and customer service, right? You have to understand the client experience. It's totally different. My clients are with me 2 to 3 years. That experience is way different than just putting a smile on for customer service. And the more touch points you can identify that are potential to go south in that relationship, and you can fix those and you can solve them and then market them, right? That's going to help like just revolutionize your business.
It can't be any different than trying to be a good human being or be a good father or be a good husband, like you're basically inventorying your business and your customer experience and looking inward. Hey, what can we do to make this a better relationship? And it's no different than if you don't look inward on yourself and inventory who you are and what you can do to be better, you're never going to be a better father, a better husband. And I don't think a lot of people do that with their business. Like they're only looking at it from their perspective, from what they see, from what their experience, from what's bothering them, what's making them have a lower bottom line. And they're not looking at it as, hey, what can I bring to the table in this relationship that's going to strengthen it?
Yeah, it's interesting perspective how you brought it back home that way, because I mean, at the summit, you know, all of us tend to be a little bossy, like just outside of it, like as we're doing activities or we're going somewhere, like we're going to dinner, and everyone's kind of has their own opinion because we're all A-type personalities, right? We're business owners for a reason. But as you mentioned earlier, Tyler, I mean, having a wife, having 5 daughters, I can't, you know, there's times I have to check myself with needs of my family or children that are at different stages, from teenagers down to elementary school. And you just have to understand the best of your ability, like their perspective and things that we can improve on, and no different than your employees or your customers. And then essentially, you know, it's just each day trying to make a little change, you know, in the right direction.
Yeah, and I think that the big issue, I think, with a lot of businesses, the customer's always right thing. And it seems that it's so polarizing where it's like you either have that mindset, the customer's always right, or no, they're not always right. And you're not looking at that as a relationship, you know, that there's two sides, that what you're experiencing and what somebody else experiencing are two different things. And I mean, that's something that I found was very valuable, having all these women at this conference, and like the kind of empathy that they possess for other human beings, where they look at business from a very different perspective than we do. And I think, you know, it's very important when you are in a business relationship with a customer that you gauge your own feelings, but also what these people are going through, because they're paying a lot of money. Their lives, if it's a remodel, their lives are disrupted. It's stressful. And again, like a lot of times you're just bleeding money, and to think like that you're going to approach that relationship the same way with every customer, and these are our rules and this is how we're going to do things, and not ever look internally to, hey, how can we improve the lives of these people and improve the experience of these people, and really look at that through their eyes. That would be foolish to not do that. And I don't think a lot of people do. They develop this business that, hey, this is what works for us and this is what works for our customers, without really gauging, when you're involved with somebody for 3 years, like just to have a surface level relationship. How many people are you friends with for 3 years? Like a lot of times you meet somebody, you hit it off. Like think of a girlfriend, right? Like to kind of foster any relationship for that long takes a lot of back and forth and understanding what people are going through. And I that's a really good point that you made, where it's like, you have a long-term relationship with these people. What are they feeling throughout this process, and how can I better and strengthen this relationship during this time?
Yeah, and the thing is, Tyler, like you have money on the line. Like,
I know.
You have deliverables, and it's like all of us know that. Why do I want? You know, we don't go into business with friends like we have good friendships with, just because what business can do. So it just complicates the whole thing.
It's tough. What were you going to say, Nick?
I was going to say, and also understanding when to ask and when to like Brad said, have that touch point, and just when to understand, and something that, you know, Brad does a good job of kind of narrating the customer experience, but what do you call it, the expectation? No, there's the
emotional roller coaster.
Yeah, and it's something that he shares in the summit, where you can kind of go in there and plug in how they're feeling at certain points, and then understand how, like, what their emotional roller coaster looks like at the end of the job, where it's like, hey, at this point in the job, they were pissed, like they were not in a good mood, but you can use that and like turn around and use that for the next client and say, hey, hey, just an FYI, this is when you're going to be really happy with me, and this is when you're going to be upset. And let me explain why you're going to be upset here. Right now, like, this is a dip in production. There's not as much going on. It doesn't feel as good. So, and I think, shout out to Clark and Adeline. They had talked about in those dips is when they'll send them a gift, like a bottle of champagne or a bottle of wine, which is super smart. It's like, hey, just so you know, like, we know right now is like there's a lull, and it doesn't seem like a lot's going on. And for us, it's everyone gets super excited when we board. It's like, oh, we made it. It's great. We're going to go right into finishes. It's like, whoa. There's a lot of work before we just start dropping finishes in here. And that's oftentimes for us is like, that's the lull. It's like, hey, we're at this point, but before you start seeing a lot of the pretty stuff going in, there's going to be this time period of not, quote unquote, not a lot of work going on. And then, one thing we talked, Brad, you mentioned it, is that then everything gets covered up. So it's like the job just looks like a construction site. And we had a project, the same thing. We were doing a bunch of mill work, and everything's ram board, plastic everywhere. And the interior designer came in and it was the last day, and they're like, "You guys are out of your mind." I'm like, "Why?" They're like, "You're never gonna finish on time." I'm like, "Everything's done." And he's like, "This place looks like a shit show." And I was like, so I just got, like, internally, I'm like pissed off. I'm like, what is he talking? Everything's done. And he left, and he came back an hour later, and right when he left, I was like, take all the ram board and plastic up before he gets back. And he came back, he's like, how'd you guys do that? I'm like, it was just covered up.
Yeah.
That, like, but visually, like, it looked like it was still a construction site.
It's true, Nick. Like, I unwrapped a job yesterday, and it was some cabinets I installed in the space, and then there's, like, all the touch-up, the patching of the walls where you hit stuff, and all the site protections down, and there's dust, and, like, my work site's contained. But, like, you take photos in your phone along the way, and you look at them, and I've gotten to the point where I know that, like, once everything's out of here, even just, all right, say everything's broken down, there's just flooring protection down, that job doesn't look complete. It doesn't, and like, it could be 10 minutes later that flooring protection's gone and the site's vacuumed, and it's like, this job is complete now. And you look at the two photos, and all it was the flooring protection, but it still looked like a construction site.
Right.
Nothing looked put together, nothing looked finished. And you pull that last bit of flooring protection out, and you're like, okay, now I can grab a photo of this where everything's completed, and it makes such a huge difference.
Yeah. I was always the guy that wanted to rip up the flooring protection, like, early, because I wanted the photos. My team's like, no, we will do it when we're done. Which is the right, the right way.
Last thing.
I'm a wildly impatient individual. Brad, I know.
We know that you got to roll at 9:30. Go play basketball with Mark.
I have a call later. Well, what's interesting is, so I have a call later with a client. But Kyle Stumpenhorse is in town, our buildings. He's going to meet me after that call. We're going to go tour him through Project Blow Your Mind later today. So he's here for a wedding with his family. So him and I think his son are going to come by and pay a visit down the Lazy River.
You better video that. That'll go viral. Brad,
it'll be good. It'll be fun to show him.
Before you go, you mentioned LinkedIn earlier. You're the king of LinkedIn. Can you just give like a 5-minute spiel on like why you find LinkedIn to be so valuable and how people should utilize it?
Yeah, to set that up, I mean, especially as you get into the just organic side. So most of us understand social media to the extent of like Instagram, right? Or maybe we just scroll through TikTok. But on Instagram, what's unique about Instagram is that if Tyler or Nick, you like my photo, that's great. I get another like, vanity metric, great. I got some more likes, and maybe it goes viral. What's different about LinkedIn is that when Tyler likes my LinkedIn post, his whole network sees that he liked it. When you do it, Nick, your whole network sees it. So just a quick example that I've shared with some people, at this event is that when I was young in my career starting out, okay, well, how do I, I'm calling architects, I'm calling designers, they're not returning my phone calls, I can't get through, I'm a young business owner. Okay, that's fine. I'm going to go non-soliciting, and I'm going to go on LinkedIn and I'm going to connect with them. I'm not going to DM them, just connect with them. We're connected, and I'm just going to post. And so these same architects, after a couple years of posting on LinkedIn, and they're like, hey, Brad, you're doing something. Like, we need to have dinner. So these same ones who would never call me back are like, let's go have dinner. Let's talk through social media. Help me with my social media. Now I have projects with both these architects, right? One of which I'll tour Kyle through. So what's interesting is that LinkedIn, I can actually target demographic, ideal clients. I can target Mayo Clinic here in town. I could target some of the top brokerages and realtors. I can target the top architects. And I don't have to do it in this confrontational, and I don't mean confrontational, but this really soliciting type of way. It's just, it's these points of contact. And I always get another example is I have a neighbor down the street that they know I'm in construction. I've told them. They see my truck all the time in my driveway. And then I connect with them on LinkedIn. And then I see them at the park, and they're like, we get it now. Like, we totally understand what AFT does and what you do. When we build a house, we're calling you. So essentially, the core of any marketing strategy, and I talked about this with Tyler, is that it's a silent salesman. You have to find people that sell your brand that aren't on your payroll. And the more silent salespeople you have that support your brand, which LinkedIn is the easiest way to do that. And on LinkedIn, they're all professionals. Most of them are executives or CEOs or salespeople. There you go. It's done. And it's stuff that I've been preaching forever, and it's wide open because there's not a lot of great content on LinkedIn still. So it's easy to really dominate that platform.
Better get on LinkedIn, Nick.
Nick's been on there. He commented on my post yesterday. So
I took the flight home, and I texted Brad. I sent him a picture that LinkedIn said, I've hit my weekly limit of connections. I was like, I didn't know. He told me 30,000 people. I didn't know I had a weekly limit.
You whore.
Yeah, they want to quit the you whore. They want to span this, but that is a good notice that you can only be connected with 30,000. You can have people follow you once you hit that, but you just can't connect and follow them back.
Well, it's funny, in Brad, like and my final point on this is like that event. It's like we're all presenting, but even I'm learning stuff from Morgan and you. And you had mentioned, your strategy on LinkedIn, and I've been using LinkedIn, and we've been posting on it. But what I failed to realize is that I wasn't connected with the people that I want to be working with. I was following just random people that I found interesting. It's like, that's fine, but that's not going to help me. So I started right there. I went down like my top list of architects. And, I was like, all right, I'm going to follow their entire firm, everyone in that company. And then same thing with brokerages and real estate professionals. It's like, these are the people that are going to ultimately allow us to do the jobs that we want. So they need to be seeing the stuff that we're building.
Well, you have to be top of mind. The thing is, Nick, like, look at it now. Nick and Tyler, you have a brand. You may have people reaching out and want to work with you. And when it comes time to refer them, you'll forget, because it's really easy mentally that if I have a job come in, there may be 3 or 4 designers, architects, and I forget the new one that's like up and coming, that may be doing great things, but they're just not top of mind. But what LinkedIn can do is it'll put you top of mind. It'll put you top of mind. So then that way, I'm always in their feed. So ideally, if this architect already has 3 builders he refers, he may think, hey, what about AFT? Let's get them a project. Let's get something out here to collaborate on.
Totally. Brad, appreciate you being on, man. And good seeing you last week. And when we actually just announced 2 more dates. So we're going to Scottsdale in May, and then Austin, Texas in September. Right?
Can't wait. So for those of you coming to Scottsdale, we get to do a field trip too. We're going to take you through some of these projects like I'm taking Kyle through today. So we're going to have a little field trip as part of the event, to see some of these projects. And, of course, a little golf, right? So better get working on that golf game.
Hey, listen.
Mini golf?
119 yards. I'm driving it anyway. So
mini golf.
I know we got to run, but the funniest thing, Nick's in the foursome behind us, and we played Monarch Beach, which is there in Dana Point on the ocean. And it's a little par 3. It's like 100 yards. And we're down on the green. We're down there. And Nick pulls out his driver, trying to, kill us down there. And luckily, he overshot us, But
of course, I
got to watch out when Nick's playing in the foursome behind you.
All Brad said was like, hey, Nick, just the most important thing is keep up. Like, make sure you stay pace behind us. I'm like, all right. And
so I'll just hit into you.
Yeah. I was like, all right, you guys are on the green. I'm going anyway. Let's go. All right, Brad. Well,
Thanks, man.
Do your client meeting. We'll chat later.
All right, good seeing you guys.
See ya. You can't hit that leave session button, so all you gotta do is X out. Yeah, you're good. See ya, dude.
See ya.
Yeah, it's golf is funny, man. Like I'm not good, but it's so fun. And he had messaged me at one point. He was like, "Hey man, you really got to keep pace." I'm like, "Keep pace? Isn't he right in front of
during while you were playing?"
Yeah, so he was in front of us in the foursome,
Yeah.
and there was and I was in the back, and it's like a very nice golf course.
Yeah.
So it's, and when you leave, they're like, "Hey, make sure you keep pace. Like, we'll be out to enforce if you're too slow." And the last time I played with him was in New York at my Builder 20 group, and there was two groups in front of us that weren't keeping pace.
Yeah.
And to the point where it was like we were sitting there for like 10 minutes waiting. And so he texts me and goes, "Yo, you really got to keep pace." And I was like, Isn't he right in front of us?
Yeah.
And he just happened to like cross the golf path, and like he was on the other side, like the back nine. And so I'm like, whatever. We finish up a hole and we come over the hill, and I go to set up my drive, and he's still on, like he's in the middle of the green. I'm like, and he's like, "Oh, you guys caught up." I'm like, "We haven't lost pace."
Yeah.
And he goes, and then we get to that little 100-yard. He goes, "See if you can hit us." I'm like, "All right." And I take out my driver, and Michael was with me from Clark and Adeline. He's like, "Dude, you can't drive that." I'm like, "Yes, I can." And sure enough, like overshot it by like 50 yards. Of course, I was like, "I'll just swing like not as hard," and that didn't work. But
that's funny.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't get into it, but he from the golf perspective, he's the one that has been pushing me to golf more, and he talks about it constantly. Is just and kind of part of very similar thought around LinkedIn, but being where your ideal clientele is, and ideal clientele meaning end user and or architects and brokers. Yeah. And it's like, and he's utilized golf, like obviously Scottsdale has a huge golf community, but he's utilized golf to solidify. I mean, I know personally of more than a handful of deals, because he'll text me. He's like, "Just sold another house on the golf course. You sign up for a membership yet?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, negative. Let me put that to the top of the priority list.
Yeah, he was telling me about that. I was like, I'm surprised that Nick doesn't have like a personal golf coach yet. And so I could see you going deep dive into golf.
But that's of course, because I'm obsessive. So yeah. I immediately the last time he messaged me, I actually have I'm supposed to meet with this kid. He was like, "Hey, I can get you in this course if you want," which has like a 50-person waiting list. He's like, "I can get you to skip the line." I'm like, done. He's like, "You just got to meet with the head guy, and like if he thinks you're legit, he'll let you sign up immediately, especially if we sign up like corporate or something like that."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "All right." So then I was like, "Do you know any golf coaches?" And he's like, "Yeah, I can hook you up." I'm like, "Good," because I'm just gonna need like a handful of lessons to just figure out what I'm doing wrong.
Yeah.
So at least I don't look like an idiot out there.
Yeah, for sure.
But
yeah. I have a buddy who took up golf for a while, and it's very similar personality, but it's like you just see them going down this like it's one of those things where it's so hard to master that game, and there's so many nuances, and like you could just learn for a lifetime, and still continually have stuff to work on and tweak and learn, and it's one of those things that could be very dangerous for a personality type like mine. Yeah. So
it's funny. I heard this podcast, and they were talking about why so many people do business on the golf course. And if you're considering doing business with someone and you go out and play legit golf, like obviously, like if you're not playing legit, like you just screw around, play best ball, like whatever, But if you're playing a legit round and you're thinking about doing business with people, judging them based on like, are they going to cheat? Are they going to,
Yeah.
And again, there's a difference between screwing around and like playing legit, but it's a good look into how someone might operate and their honesty. It's like, 2 feet away from the pin, that's a gimme.
Yeah.
Like, that's good enough, right?
No, I mean, a lot of people play golf for business reasons. It's one of those things that you just have to invest so much time in it to get decent at it and understand it. And then I think that you have to keep at it, right? Yeah. Just like anything else, like, you're better when you're consistent with it, and then making the time to do that on a consistent basis, like listening to Brad and how much he actually golfs. You have to find a way that you're bringing value to your life doing that much.
Right.
I also, like, for me, I don't like being out exposed in the sun and walking, and I don't drink, so I'm like, I'm all right, I don't need to golf.
Yeah.
It's expensive too.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, let's get on with our day here. Next week, who do we got coming up here? I had it pulled up, and
Dwayne, I believe, is next week. Dwayne McEwen.
Yeah, from DMAC Architecture and Interiors.
He was a reschedule. Is it
Dwayne or Trevor?
No, Trevor's who I've been dealing with for Dwayne.
Got it. Cool.
So,
I was going to read what he wants to talk about, but he says, I'll update you before we record. So we're just going to go into it.
I have an email in my inbox from them, so I'll forward that along to you.
All right, cool. So we'll get into it with Dwayne from DMAC Architecture next week. As always, we appreciate you guys listening. Hop over to iTunes. Make sure you drop us a review. And we'll see you then. Thanks to our sponsors, Rockwool.